This episode of the Lutheran Cartographer is brought to you by the Ron Paul Homeschool Curriculum. If you're looking for a good curriculum, check it out at lutherancartographer.com/homeschool. The Lutheran Cartographer, Episode 36. Welcome to the Lutheran Cartographer, the podcast where we explore what it's like to be Lutheran in different places. I'm your host, Nicholas Weber. After a few weeks of hiatus caused by some technical issues, as well as summer vacations, it's good to be back with you. Today we are going to Oklahoma to talk to Pastor Tiews of Trinity Lutheran Church in Okmulgee, Oklahoma. Pastor Tiews, welcome to the show.
Good to be here, Nicholas. Thank you for inviting me.
Certainly. So help orient us geographically. Where exactly are we? We're in Oklahoma. Where in Oklahoma are we?
Right. Yeah, we're in Oklahoma. So Oklahoma is pretty much the center of the United States. I always get irked when they say that we're the Midwest, because we're not the Midwest. The Midwest is Missouri and Illinois and so on. We're in the Great Plains. So we're in the southern half of the Great Plains, just north of Texas. And I live in Tulsa, which is in the northeastern part of Oklahoma. But the church in which I serve is Okmulgee. It's a town of 12,000, and that is about 40 miles south of Tulsa. So I go back and forth. And we are in so-called green country of Oklahoma, which means that we're kind of a bridge between the foothills of the Ozarks to our east and to the plains to our west.
I see. Excellent. All right, so give us a little introduction to yourself. Where have you been, and how did you end up in the middle of Oklahoma?
I was born in Munich, Germany, and mathematically I've spent about half of my life in Germany and half of my life in the United States. My early childhood in California, and then at the age of 10, my mother and I, my father's was German, he's deceased. My mother and I moved back to Germany, and I went to formative school there, so-called gymnasium, which is kind of like a prep school. And so 9 years of that, of gymnasium, and during which time I had 5 years of classical Greek, 9 years of Latin, and but all in a humanist environment, meaning in a very much post-Christian environment. Or to say it another way, even though I was baptized as an infant, I was far, far, far away from God until the age of 40, which was 23 years ago. So I like to call myself the Dollar General version of St. Paul. Very much a conversion experience. I didn't do as bad things as St. Paul did, but it's definitely a tremendous shift between a happy or / unhappy agnostic, and then the Lord drew me to himself in the late 90s. In the meantime, I had been married and divorced and then remarried, and my wife Lula and I moved from Germany to Texas in 96, and at that time I was still the happy, unhappy agnostic. And the Lord called me to himself a year later in 1997 in an LCMS church, of which I had no clue what that was, LCMS, any of that, but we just happened to be in an LCMS church. And we can continue with that story or not, but it's definitely a Dollar General St. Paul.
Excellent. So, yeah, continue with that just a bit more. How did you end up in, how's the town name pronounced?
Okmulgee. Okmulgee, south of Tulsa. So the Lord called me to himself in 97 in a very powerful conversion experience where I heard the gospel for the very first time from the mouth of an LCMS pastor. And we served, Lula, my wife, also to a certain extent, but I served at that church for about 8 years in a variety of positions. First, Lula and I did children's church, things like that. Then They maybe about 5 years later, they called me to serve as an elder, and which in retrospect is a little bit shocking because I didn't know too much what I was doing, but I was an elder nonetheless. And then a couple of years later, they started a small group project, Purpose-Driven Life. I don't know if that's before your time. You might have heard of that. It was very popular in the 90s and the early 2000s. And so this is a large church by Lutheran standards. And so within maybe 2 or 3 weeks, there were over 1,000 people in that small group program. And so I was very busy spending a lot of my time doing these things in the church as a volunteer. And in 2004, so then 7 years after that conversion experience, I called up my pastor one Saturday evening, and I said, I've been kind of assessing everything I've done so far, and I've had Greek, and I've had Latin, and I have a master's degree in geology, and all of these things, they seem very muddled and incoherent. But I think from the point of view as a pastor, I think the Lord might be able to use these things. And he said, that's a fantastic idea. Go to the seminary. We will help you, which they did. And so the next year we packed up. We sold our home with 3 acres and 2 horses and 2 goats and 10 cats. We sold all of that and went to the seminary. I went to St. Louis, then went through the seminary, 3 years of a residential program there. And then in my 4th year, which was a deferred vicarage, then they sent me to Tulsa. So that's how we wound up in Tulsa. I won't say for me, Oklahoma was flyover country, because I find the term not too flattering, but it certainly was a white spot on the map. I didn't know anything about Oklahoma, except we sometimes drove through it from St. Louis to visit my mother in Houston. That's about all I knew. And so we've been in Oklahoma ever since 2010. So 10 years now. It's a wonderful state.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit more about how the atmosphere of Oklahoma compares to some of the other places you've been, whether it's Germany or Texas or California.
Right. Well, Oklahoma is a conservative state, and just like in most states in the United States, the rural areas are conservative and the cities tend to be more liberal. So, but there's a lot of rural area in Oklahoma, and there are 2 main cities, Tulsa and Oklahoma City, the capital. But the rural areas are very conservative, and so Okmulgee is in that area. They call Tulsa the buckle of the Bible Belt because ORU, Oral Roberts University, is located there, and so it's very Pentecostal and so on. So it is definitely a Christian state, although here too the Christianity is kind of fraying at the edges. Having said that, if you will, I don't want to say the quality of Christianity, but it is heavily influenced and flavored by American Christianity, which of course would not be liturgical and would be very low on the sacraments, a poor understanding of the sacraments, and a lot of Baptists, and all good people. And again, just to make this very clear, I'm not saying that these people are not going to heaven. Of course they're going to heaven. But without the sacraments, you certainly have a less rich Christian life. You do not experience the forgiveness of sins, life, and salvation, as we know from the Small Catechism. And so it is Christianity that could be enriched, but unfortunately for many is not. And so Okmulgee itself is a town that saw its heyday in the 1920s, as did much of Okmulgee. It is said that in the 1920s, during the oil boom, there were more millionaires per square mile in Okmulgee than anywhere in the United States.
Wow.
So, I'm not sure whether that is fact or myth, but it is true. If you look at some of the homes around Okmulgee, they're very beautiful, and they're about 100 years old. But right now it's lost a lot of its glamour. There is a wonderful movement has been afoot for 6 or 7 years called Okmulgee Rising, where a number of younger people in their 20s and 30s are trying to revive Okmulgee, to draw business to it, and so on. But it is certainly a town that has seen better days in the past. And so we are in the only Lutheran church, even including the ELCA or WELS. We're the only Lutheran church in Okmulgee County, at Trinity Lutheran in Okmulgee. And it is a growing church. It is a lively church. And what is, I find quite amazing, we serve 6,000 square miles from Trinity Okmulgee. In other words, we have many, many people who drive 50, 60 miles each way to receive the Lord's gifts at Trinity Okmulgee. And they come from Tulsa and from every point around Okmulgee.
Excellent. So that's a good introduction to Okmulgee. Tell us a little bit more about what are some of the things that you consider the best things about being there.
The best things about Okmulgee, very, very warm people, just as the people in Oklahoma are very warm, as they are in surrounding states, Texas too, and in other states around us. Very warm, and our church was founded in 1921, and the building that we're in now was built in 1958, so that the church moved in the late 50s. And so we have a lot of dyed-in-the-wool cradle Lutherans. However, I'm very grateful. We've had a lot of, I think, since I've been there 5 years now, and I think we've had over 70 new members. And of those 70 new members, about half of them did not used to be Christian. And I love that statistic because it shows, you sometimes hear, well, you basically, if you don't have any Lutherans in your town, your church cannot grow. It is impossible to reach non-Lutherans in any town. And I think that is incorrect. And it is shown to be true, proven to be true in Okmulgee, that due to the warmth of the people and with good catechesis, and to be fair, also with a good online presence, it is, and Issues Etc. too. Let me put in a plug for them. A number of our people have found us through Issues Etc. So it is possible to grow, it is possible for the Lord to grow your church even if you are not in a traditionally Lutheran environment. So the good things, there's a lot of countryside around Okmulgee. There are 2 beautiful lakes nearby. You could say another very important thing for Okmulgee is that we are only 40 miles south of Tulsa. So a lot of people commute to Tulsa, and I commute in the opposite direction, which is good for driving, so I never have any traffic. And so even though Okmulgee is not doing so well economically, what keeps Okmulgee going are at least 2 things. One is the proximity to Tulsa, so people can work there, but also a wonderful technical college, OSUIT. It is the Information Technology Annex of the Oklahoma State University. The headquarters of OSU, as you may know, if you're a football fan, is in Stillwater. Stillwater is west of Tulsa, but there's a technical college in Okmulgee, and for technical trades, and they have a 2-year college, and they train all the technical things, mechanics and HVAC and culinary and all these other things, and that is a very good thing. So even though it's a small town, to a certain extent, you could say that Okmulgee is a college town. And I mentioned this Okmulgee Rising group earlier. One wonderful thing that they have done, together with local entrepreneurs and businessmen and investors, they have turned the former post office, which is 1920s era, once again, a beautiful post office, kind of run down over the decades. They have turned that into a student dormitory in downtown Okmulgee, which now houses, I think they reopened it maybe 2 or 3 years ago, houses 80 students from OSU IT. And so then these 80 students, of course, they are the nucleus of bringing life back to downtown Okmulgee, and with coffee shops and all the rest of it. So there's a lot of potential for Okmulgee, and a beautiful bones, as they call it, a lot of 1920s architecture, kind of Art Deco style and so on. So there's a great future for Okmulgee, and thanks to the good people and the entrepreneurial spirit there, they are in fact making it a better and better place to live every year.
That is fantastic. It's wonderful to have those people in your community that are really invested in building it up. Let's take a moment for a word from our sponsor. At this time, a lot of parents and grandparents are considering keeping their children at home when the government schools open back up in the fall, and I would encourage you to do the same. If you're looking for a curriculum, I would recommend checking out the Ron Paul Homeschool Curriculum. This will teach your children well how to live in the left-hand kingdom with classes in business, natural sciences, as well as college prep, in addition to all the usual subjects that you would expect from any curriculum, such as mathematics and history. Best thing about this curriculum is that it is self-directed after the 3rd grade, so you don't have to pull your hair out trying to stay a step ahead of your children in the curriculum. If you're interested, I'd recommend checking it out at lutherancartographer.com/homeschool. That's lutherancartographer.com/homeschool. Let's get back to our guest. Let's now turn to the other side of the coin. You've mentioned how the town has seen better days and there are these economic challenges. What would you say are some of the most challenging things about living in that area?
Well, one of the most challenging thing is, since it is, if you will, it is kind of coming out of economic depression. So there is a high rate of unemployment, and along with the unemployment, a malaise among certain people. They used to have, up to, I think until the 80s and so, I think they had 3 supermarkets. They basically now only have the supermarket of a large American retailer and their supermarket there, and then a few Dollar General type stores, and that's it. So it is the selection has narrowed, and so there is these young people who are trying to pull up the town. I think they do have to be honest, have to work a little bit against kind of a malaise in town. Another thing, and this is a kind of an Oklahoma problem. You might know that has it been the last year or 2 years? I think only the last year, Oklahoma has allowed medicinal marijuana. And so you have these so-called dispensaries popping up all over. I want to say in the town of 12,000, I want to say there are already something like 15 dispensaries in Okmulgee, which is crazy. And they're not all going to survive, I would think. But having this, and it's also sad to say that it is quite easy to receive your marijuana. The hurdle to receive the medicinal marijuana is very low. It's very low. So pretty much anyone can get marijuana who wants it, and that is also, as you might know, taking marijuana is not exactly good for your enthusiasm, and you're just dealing with life. So you tend to kind of slump and just take it whatever day by day, and it kills a lot of enthusiasm and spirit. And so we have I'm sure that also contributes to somewhat of the malaise in the town. But nonetheless, I think it's on an upward trend. But there's a lot of basically historical baggage to deal with. Another historical baggage. Nicholas, you might, maybe in your kitchen, you might have these glass mason jars that says Ball on them. It's a famous brand, Ball. Well, there used to be a ball manufacturing plant in Okmulgee. In fact, I believe there were 3 glass manufacturers in Okmulgee, and they all folded over the decades. I think the last one to fold was maybe in the 1980s. There used to be a refinery in Okmulgee that also disappeared. And again, in its heyday, Okmulgee had cinemas and all kinds of entertainment and hotels and so on. And now the cinemas are gone and the entertainment is gone, and it is all kind of reduced to Highway 75, which is the highway between one of 2 highways between Tulsa and Dallas. So a lot of traffic runs through Okmulgee, which is good. It keeps the businesses and the fast food places and so on along 75, keeps them going, but it isn't homegrown, right? There are a few factories in Okmulgee, but compared to say 50 years ago, it's got to be a fraction. And so one of the goals also of the local leaders and the state representatives and so on is to bring factories back to Okmulgee. Let me add a positive thing I forgot to mention earlier. So I mentioned that there are a lot of entrepreneurial spirits. There is a wonderful movement connecting Okmulgee High School and this OSU IT that I mentioned, and that is an aviation class that they are offering in Okmulgee High School, and they are doing this together with OSU IT. And so it's an elective, but they are teaching young people who are interested to fly drones. And so there is a small but growing movement to attract aviation companies to Okmulgee, because they are training dozens and dozens of young people to fly drones and in related aviation areas as well. And so if you think about Amazon and all of these companies, and they say that they're going to be droning in their products, that concept alone I think is fascinating. But let's assume they actually wind up doing that. They're going to need drone operators, and to fly all these products into your home and business. And so Okmulgee is very forward-looking in that they are trying to create the workforce to operate these things, and as such to draw high-quality companies to Okmulgee in the aviation field. And the local and the state politicians have been working on that for a number of years, and I find it very exciting.
That is exciting. So let's now turn to what it's like to be Lutheran in Okmulgee. You've already mentioned that you're in the buckle of the Bible Belt and kind of the challenges that come with being among American Christianity. Say more about that, and say more about what it's like to be Lutheran there.
Right. Well, Lutherans, as in, I guess, so many towns outside of the northern Midwest, are a best-kept secret, to put it positively. I like to say there are four stereotypes of what people think of Lutherans, and I've run across all 4 of these stereotypes. So some people, or maybe 5. The first one would be never heard of it. Okay, fair enough. But those who have heard of a Lutheran, sometimes you hear, and maybe you can confirm this, Nicholas, sometimes you hear, well, Lutherans, aren't you some kind of Catholic light? So, in other words, they might have heard of the liturgy, and to be fair, not every LCMS church does the liturgy, I know that, but quite a few do. And so they think we're some kind of Bud Light Catholics. Another false stereotype, another myth, is that, unfortunately, they don't distinguish between the LCMS and the ELCA. So they think that Lutherans are extremely liberal. And as I said earlier, in describing rural Oklahoma, it's quite conservative. So liberal social mores and so on would not fly too well. So they think so we're some kind of liberals, and so that doesn't go well. Another false stereotype that we sometimes run across is that Lutherans worship Luther. So this obviously is also wrong. It's one of the four solas, sola fide, sola gratia, sola scriptura. The fourth one is solus Christus. And so Luther, if anyone who knows anything about Luther would know that he points to Christ. And there are many paintings and many statues of him pointing to Christ. A number of years ago, we led a group of 43 American Lutherans through Lutherland, Wittenberg and Eisenach and Eisleben and all of that area. And in the city church, St. Mary's Church in Wittenberg, there's a very, very famous painting. I'm sure you've seen it. It's a triptych, and it literally shows Luther with a Bible in one hand, pointing to a crucifix with the other hand. And so Luther always pointed to Christ. And so for someone to claim that Luther is worship Luther, I'm sure that would have him spinning in his grave all the way down to China. So, and the last one is actually my favorite. It's only occurred to me, only occurred once, but it's still actually hilarious. And this was some kind of dyslexic who was not able to read the word Lutheran properly, and so he thought we worship Lucifer. And I said, no, Lucifer is actually with a C. Lutheran is with a TH. It's just a little bit different. So I've actually heard that, though. So you just gotta scratch your head. So, but the main problem is that they don't know who we are. They think we're some kind of Catholic or something, and this is a problem. I would think that pretty much every Lutheran church outside of the northern Midwest, possibly even in Washington State, would have. That people don't know who you are, or there's a complete misconception of what we are and what we stand for.
What's it like to raise a family there? What do you see as kind of the experience of your parishioners or you yourself raising a family there?
Yeah, well, we have a fair number of children. So we have about 112 people in our congregation, and I think about 25 under the age of 18. So that's a good thing. However, as you and I discussed earlier, Nicholas, to be fair, it is, if you are of marriageable age, it might be difficult in a smaller Lutheran church to find a spouse. Having said that, the previous church at which I served in Tulsa, one of our daughters, we have 6 children, one of our daughters did in fact meet her husband there. And it's a little bit larger than Trinity, but not too much larger. And so that actually worked, and he's an LCMS guy, and his family is LCMS, and so that was really great. And just last week, we had one of our young women from our church in Okmulgee got married to a young man whom she's known her whole life and who was in church with her. So it does happen, but it's not as easy as if you had a church of, certainly if you had some kind of church with 30,000 people. So that is a bit of a challenge. Having said that, that's why I'm very grateful for organizations like Higher Things, who do bring young people together at least once a year. And so ideally, if you go several years in a row, you might bump into the same other churches again. And so that way the young people can meet one another too. But the whole community aspect and raising families and finding Lutheran spouses for your children is more difficult in a small church outside of, I guess, the northern Midwest.
All right, so that makes sense. That's a good insight into what it's like to raise a family. Now, let's turn to one of my favorite parts of the podcast where we talk about the hidden gems of the area, places to eat, things to see. What would you say to, like, you've got a friend coming into town, what would you say, you got to go see this?
Right. Well, if they're coming into town, they're most likely going to come into Tulsa. And so there's a wealth of stuff to do in Tulsa. Tulsa is, you might have heard of a park that was established last year. It is called the Gathering Place. And last year, USA Today named the gathering place, this park, the best new attraction in the whole of the United States. It is right along the Arkansas River, and it is has something for everyone. It has playgrounds, excellent playgrounds, actually imported from Germany, with all kinds of fantastic castles and so on. It has 10 basketball courts. It has 4 different skate parks, and it has a lake, a man-made lake with canoes free for using, and has concerts there. And it's a really, really, really wonderful thing. Let me just put in a plug for Tulsa. Tulsa is known for having wonderful entrepreneurs and donors. And there's one particular donor, a gentleman by the name of George Kaiser, a very wealthy man of German descent, German extraction. He has donated, I believe, all of his wealth, not spreading it across the United States, but just giving all of these riches to Tulsa, and it really shows. So he spearheaded this gathering place. I believe he paid for half of it out of his own pocket. The other half was local companies, and he has also spawned a formerly desolate industrial area just north of downtown. It is called Guthrie Green. He started a few museums there and supported art projects, and so Guthrie Green has turned into a little cultural gem with museums and of course coffee shops opening up and restaurants and breweries and so on. Another thing too, if you enjoy Lutheran beverages as I do, there are probably 15 different breweries in Tulsa. It's quite an amazing brewery scenery, and so that is something great. The climate in Oklahoma or in eastern Oklahoma is actually quite nice. We do have 4 seasons. To be fair, the summers are probably the longest season, and to be fair, it also does get humid here. That's true, and we sometimes get into the 100s. And but nonetheless, we do have 4 seasons. We usually have 1 or 2 snows per winter, and we have a spring and we have a fall, and so it's a good place to visit. There are also big ticket concerts in Tulsa. So all of that stuff is going on in Tulsa. And in Okmulgee proper, there are 2 lakes very close by, and beautiful homes that you can tour, again, that from the 1920s. So Okmulgee, to be honest, I don't know if there's too much to see there. You can tour OSUIT and see what's going on there, but your bigger tourism attraction will probably be in Tulsa.
Okay, good deal. All right, now as we start to close out the podcast, I want to make sure to take the opportunity to give you the chance to plug anything that you would like. Where would you like to point our listeners? Your church's website, places to follow you online. Where would you like to point our listeners?
Yes, I would invite you to visit our Facebook page, Trinity Lutheran Church Okmulgee. Okmulgee is spelled Okmulgee, or you can visit our website, trinityokmulgee.org. And also, I would invite you, if you are not Lutheran, to explore Lutheranism, which is the clearest form and the most original form of Christianity that we have today. No one's perfect. We're not perfect either, but it is. I do believe, having studied this a long time now, it is the closest thing to the apostolic Christianity. And if you are Lutheran, I encourage you to take up your pastor's offers to be catechized. Please attend his Bible studies. Go to church, receive the Lord's gifts of word and sacrament every week, maybe twice a week if they offer that. And don't take your Christian faith for granted. Especially as Nicholas was saying that in his neck of the woods, literally, things are kind of changing in society, and Christians are being kind of pushed out more and more and more. We have an incredible gift, and that is salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ. And we have the church, as we just read today in the Treasury of Daily Prayer. The church, as we read in 1 Corinthians, is the body of Christ, where each one is blessed with particular gifts of teaching, gifts of hospitality, gifts of healing, and so on. And so if you are a so-called a Christian who does not believe in organized religion, you are depriving yourself from the gifts that God wants to give you through other Christians. And the flip side is also true. If you are not part of a local church, you are also depriving others of the gifts that God has given you to share with others. So be part of your church, be engaged, read your Bible every day, be catechized, and let the Lord work through you as he blesses others, just as he blesses, I'm sure, many, many people through this delightful podcast and the work that Nicholas is doing here in the Lord's kingdom.
Amen. Thank you so much, Pastor Tiews. Any other parting thoughts before we say goodbye?
Well, this was delightful. Thank you for what a great idea to kind of map out different areas of Lutheranism. It's really an interesting idea. It would be, I don't know how far you want to extend this, if you want to extend it beyond the borders of the United States. It would be interesting to talk to Lutherans, or have you talk to Lutherans around the planet. Maybe food for thought. Maybe it's already on your to-do list. I don't know.
Yeah, we've talked to a few in Scandinavia, and after we're done recording, perhaps you might tell me a few people I could talk to in Germany. So thank you again for your time today. God's peace.
God bless you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you so much. That's a wrap. Thanks for listening to the Lutheran Cartographer. For more about the things that we talked about today, including links to all those great places that Pastor Tiews told us about, go to lutherancartographer.com/36. If you'd like to check out that homeschool curriculum, if you're still looking for a curriculum or the curriculum you're using isn't working out for you, go ahead and head on over to lutherancartographer.com/homeschool to check that out. Also, I'd appreciate it if you'd take a moment to leave a rating and a review for the show on iTunes or on Stitcher or whatever your favorite podcast platform is. That way more people will be able to listen to the show. Until next time, I'm Nicholas Weber. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you soon.